Lewis Hamilton hit with track limits penalty, forced to start P16, and erupts at his team for failing to alert him. Stay tuned until the end for the full breakdown and fallout. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Lewis Hamilton's final qualifying lap wasn't just another attempt at pole. It was the physical embodiment of defiance, experience, and raw belief, fused into a single moment on track. He had already endured 2 scrappy, compromised runs, one ruined by a late-arriving Aston Martin crawling through Sector 2 as if it were a parade lap, forcing Lewis to check up and completely abandon the rhythm. The second was shaping up to be something special until a gust of wind hit the rear of the car mid-corner at turn 9, causing the rear to step out, barely a fraction, but enough to kill the flow. So by the time he rolled back into the pit lane for one final set of soft tires, everything was riding on this. The team knew it. The fans knew it. And Hamilton, calm behind the visor, breathing slow and deep, felt it in his bones. This wasn't just about qualifying position, it was about sending a message. A message to the paddock. To Ferrari. To Red Bull. To the critics. To the world. That Lewis Hamilton, at 40 years old, wasn't just still here, he was still that guy. As the mechanics released the car for one final shot at glory, the energy inside the garage was electric, volatile, barely contained. There wasn't a single voice. Not a single sound beyond the high-pitched whine of the car easing out onto the pit lane. Engineers frozen in place. Toto Wolff stood with arms crossed, not blinking. Everyone knew what this could be. Everyone wanted it. The outlap was methodical. Brakes warmed, tires prepped, engine toggles triple-checked. No unnecessary weaving. Just a steady, deliberate march to war. And when he rounded the final bend to start his hot lap, it was as if a switch flipped inside him. Hamilton unleashed the full arsenal, years of muscle memory, apex hunting precision, throttle modulation so smooth it looked like time was bending. Sector 1. Purple. Fastest of anyone. Lightning through the first sequence. He sliced through the S's like they were a personal dance routine. Brake release and steering angle were synchronized in brutal harmony, carving through the corners while kissing the inside curves with millimetric control. He wasn't just fast, he was violent with the car, commanding it to obey. Sector 2. Green. Not the best, but competitive. Still 2/10 up on provisional pole. Still fully in the fight. And the live delta, flashing on his dash, confirmed it. He was making time, inch by inch. But what made it all the more shocking, all the more tragic, was the silence. That empty void over the radio. No warning. No guidance. No watch turn 4, no stay tight at exit, nothing. The place where, lap after lap, his engineer usually dropped those vital notes, suddenly void. For a driver like Hamilton, who lives at the razor-thin limit between legend and disaster, that silence was a betrayal. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. In those high-stakes final meters of the lap, his trust wasn't just in the car, it was in his team. His spotter. His strategist. His race engineer. And for the first time in a long, long while, they weren't there when it mattered most. Not vocally. Not visually. Not in time. Crossing the finish line, the readout came in. Good. Very good. That's all I've got, man, he said into the void, voice hoarse, drained, honest. He wasn't exaggerating. That was everything. That lap had cost him tire life, mental energy, and possibly even a few months of life expectancy. It was on the limit, but not over. In his heart, he knew he'd stayed within bounds. He felt the car. He saw the white lines. He managed the risk. And yet, minutes later, while catching his breath in the paddock, Hamilton noticed something strange on the live timing. His name, which had comfortably settled into P3, suddenly dipped to P5. Then a dreaded asterisk appeared. Lap under investigation. Track limits, turn 4. A chill ran down his spine. Not disbelief, fury. Cold, coiled, restrained fury. He turned to his race engineer, voice quiet but biting. Why didn't I hear anything? A pause. A stuttered response. Too late. Too vague. No accountability. He didn't scream. He didn't slam a helmet. He didn't throw anything. He just stood there, staring at the timing monitor like it had personally betrayed him. Because in that moment, Lewis Hamilton wasn't just a driver. He was a gladiator who had entered the Colosseum alone, fought the beasts, and emerged bloody but alive, only to be told the match never counted. The footage was reviewed. An inch, barely the width of a fingernail, had exceeded the limit at the edge of turn 4. Not by force. Not by recklessness. But because no one had reminded him. Because the one safety line every top driver depends on during qualifying had frayed. And still, Lewis didn't erupt. Didn't call out the team on camera. Didn't cause a scene. He just walked slowly toward the motorhome, expression unreadable, but his silence said more than any interview ever could. This wasn't about one lap. This wasn't just a deleted time. This was about principle, about preparation, about trust. And anyone who knows Lewis Hamilton, anyone who has followed his career from the karting circuits to the pinnacle of F1, knows that a moment like this doesn't break him. It builds him. It fuels him. It becomes part of the fire that has carried him to 7 world championships and nearly 100 pole positions. He would remember this silence. Not with resentment, but with focus. The kind of focus that reshapes races. The kind that rewrites championships. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. So if you were in the paddock that night, and you happened to catch a glimpse of Hamilton walking with purpose, eyes locked forward, jaw tight, you'd know. They may have deleted the lap, but they just awakened the storm. The roar of the crowd still echoed across the circuit when the screens began flickering. Hamilton's name glowed at the top, a purple lap, perfection in motion. Every sector clean, every apex kissed with clinical precision. The cameras panned to the Ferrari garage, where mechanics exchanged silent nods, some even smiling under their headsets. Engineers clapped. Strategy team members bumped fists. It had been a rough weekend, plagued by setup inconsistencies and wind sensitivity, but Lewis, relentless, unwavering, had pulled off a lap that defied all expectations. A lap that screamed, "I'm still here." And then, like a storm creeping over a sunny skyline, the whispers started. Quiet. Subtle. At first, just a note in the race control system, track limits under investigation, car 44. But it didn't stop there. Sector by sector, warning by warning, the data started bleeding red across the timing monitors. Not one violation. Not 2. 4. 4 distinct corners. Turn 4, turn 10, turn 13, and the brutal sweeping turn 19. 4 locations. All within millimeters. Not visibly wide, not egregious, but according to the sensors, beyond the white line. And in the world of Formula One, millimeters might as well be miles. Initially, no one reacted. Ferrari's pit wall stayed calm. Some believed it was a glitch. After all, how could a lap that smooth, that surgically executed, breach track limits 4 times without a single radio warning? But the FIA didn't flinch. The word came down like thunder, lap time deleted for multiple track limits violations. And then, another line that made stomachs drop across the paddock. 5-second time penalty applied for repeated infringements with prior warnings issued. The room went cold. In the Ferrari garage, you could hear the hydraulic hiss of cooling fans and the distant drone of pit lane activity. But inside, it was as if the world had stopped spinning. Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, the man who had dragged this red machine back into championship contention, was being demoted. Not just stripped of his lap. Sent down to P16. 16. Out of position. Out of rhythm. Out of contention. The mechanics froze. Bonington's eyes darted to the monitors in disbelief. Fred Vasseur, still focused on the telemetry, didn't immediately realize what had just detonated in his own house. And then, Lewis arrived. Gloves half off, helmet ripped from his head, eyes blazing with a fury that made even the most seasoned engineers brace themselves. He stomped into the engineering station, face red, chest heaving. The air around him crackled. This wasn't disappointment. This wasn't frustration. This was betrayal, pure and raw. Where the F***ing** hell was the call. His voice exploded like a grenade across the garage. The engineers flinched. Bonington lowered his headset. Vasseur blinked, caught in the crossfire of data and disaster. Lewis, we were monitoring the deltas. Lewis slammed his fist onto the telemetry desk, rattling the monitors. Monitoring. Monitoring what, Fred? The FING wind speed? Because you sure as hell weren't watching me. 4 corners. 4 corners and no one bothers to say a word. Lewis, listen. No. Don't tell me to listen. I drove that lap like my life depended on it. I gave you everything. And you let them take it away. For what? Millimeters? 4F ****ing millimeters. Bonington tried to reason, voice gentle, like someone trying to calm a firestorm with a whisper. We noticed the warning at turn 4 after you passed it, and by then, it was. Oh, after, Lewis barked, his voice thick with venom. You noticed it after. Genius. So we wait for the FIA to penalize me before we warn me? What kind of operation is this? You think Red Bull lets Max drive blind? You think GP just watches in silence while Max gets flagged 4 times? No. They're proactive. They're connected. They give a damn. Fred stepped forward, more assertive now. We didn't want to overload you during the lap. You were purple across all sectors. Lewis's laugh was dry. Bitter. So instead you thought, let's let him drive straight into a penalty and figure it out afterwards? That's the call? That's your F*******ing strategy. No one dared interrupt him now. The entire garage had stopped. Junior engineers stood frozen. The tire crew looked away. The Ferrari comms channel was dead silent, every voice gone quiet in reverence, or fear. Outside, chaos. The media was already spinning the story. Hamilton hit with penalty, drama at Ferrari, censors versus legend. Twitter was ablaze. Instagram reels with red sector overlays flooded timelines. Commentators speculated whether this marked a turning point in Hamilton's relationship with Ferrari. Analysts debated whether the penalty was too harsh, whether the FIA was becoming robotic in its rulings. Fans were enraged, divided, electrified. Back inside, Lewis stepped away from the desk, exasperated beyond words. You didn't just let me down, he muttered. Quieter now but still burning. You let us down. You let this team down. Bonington whispered, we'll appeal it. We'll bring up the inconsistencies. Maybe get it reversed. Lewis turned slowly, like a man who already knew the outcome. You think the FIA's gonna reverse anything when the broadcast's already shown the penalty? When the censors have logged the data? You think they'll admit their system's flawed for me? Not AF *****ing chance. No one spoke. Not because they didn't have anything to say, but because nothing would make it right. Nothing would undo the 5 seconds. Nothing would rewrite the humiliation of P16. The lap was gone. The moment was lost. And in its place stood a raging titan, left to wonder how the hell one of the greatest laps he'd ever driven had become just another number on a screen, erased, discarded, and buried beneath bureaucracy and silence. And in that silence, something changed. Not just in Lewis. In the whole team. Because it wasn't just about track limits anymore. It was about trust, communication, accountability, and war. And the next time Lewis went out on track, there would be no monitoring, no second guessing, no silence, only fire, and the world would feel it. No, Bono. Absolutely not. Don't even start with that tone. Lewis' voice cracked through the comms room like a whip, sharp and filled with heat. You tell me on lap 1 when I'm a fraction wide. You tell me when the wind shifts direction, when the track temp rises by a single degree, when I'm trailing another car by 6/10 in Sector 3. You talk to me about tire degradation after 6 corners. But when I'm on the most critical lap of the whole goddamn weekend, when the car's on the edge, when I'm emptying myself into every apex, every breaking point, risking a lockup just to squeeze another 10th, that's when you go silent. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. The engineers by the telemetry screens had stopped pretending to analyze data. The only sound was the soft whir of the cooling fans and the rising storm in Lewis' voice. You just decide I'll figure it out? That I'll magically sense there's traffic stacking in turn 12? You thought I was psychic all of a sudden? What the hell kind of logic is that? Fred Vasseur, trying to contain the fallout before it went nuclear, lifted his hands, calm but tense. Lewis, the data stream had a delay. 2 seconds, maybe 3. There was a problem syncing the GPS telemetry with the live sector delta feed. We were about to call it. And Charles was told. Lewis shouted, his voice cracking like thunder. He got the call in time. He lifted. He managed his delta. He protected the lap. He's in P3 on the grid tomorrow. I'm P16. Don't you dare stand there and chalk this up to sync issues. That's not miscommunication. That's something else entirely. That's selective communication. That's silence used as a weapon. Fred exhaled, resisting the urge to break eye contact. Lewis, we prepped the message, but in the scramble we prioritized Charles's feed. He was further ahead on track. Oh, of course you did, Lewis snapped. His jaw clenched. Prioritized. Now we're using the word. Say it again. Out loud. Say it in front of everyone so at least it's honest. Say it so I stop pretending I'm not being used as a pawn in your Golden Boy project. The room froze. Nobody dared speak. Engineers stared at the floor. Strategists looked at their shoes. The PR lead in the corner instinctively reached for his phone, like he could make this vanish with a single call. Don't talk to me about delays. I've been racing longer than some of you have been walking. I've seen teams implode from the inside. I've felt when a garage turns cold. And right now. Lewis stared straight into Fred's eyes. It's freezing in here. He grabbed his helmet bag with one hand, shoved his visor inside with the other, and without waiting for permission or a parting word, turned and walked out of the room like a man who no longer owed anyone explanations. But this wasn't over. Not even close. As he cut through the paddock, his stride was sharp, his eyes scanning, calculating, searching for something or someone. The whispers had already started, spreading like fuel on tarmac. Every step he took left scorched silence behind him. Camera crews hesitated. Fans leaned over barriers, sensing a storm gathering in a way only true racing fans can. And then, he saw him. Charles Leclerc. The Monégasque driver was mid-interview, smiling politely in front of the local press, headphones still dangling from his neck, his red and black race suit still gleaming under the paddock lights. He looked calm, rehearsed, media-trained. But he hadn't seen Lewis yet. And then, he did. Their eyes locked for just a second. But in that second, everything changed. Lewis walked straight toward him. Not fast, not loud. Just direct. Determined. Relentless. Charles hesitated, his sentence to the reporter drifting off. "Et pourquoi, pardon," he turned fully, and the moment froze in time. "Mid-lap," Lewis said, his voice low but full of bite. "You got the call. You backed off. You saved the lap. You knew." Charles blinked. "Lewis, I didn't know you weren't warned. I thought." "You thought nothing," Lewis snapped, stepping closer. "You heard it. You knew the traffic was stacking. You reacted. And then you went purple in Sector 2. Don't pretend otherwise." The cameras were rolling. Reporters were still. Every microphone pointed like a loaded gun. "Look," Charles said, trying to keep his tone even, "I assumed we both got the same message. That's how it's supposed to work." "That's how it's supposed to work," Lewis repeated. "But it didn't. And you benefited. Again." The tension wasn't just between the two drivers anymore, it was seeping into the fabric of the paddock. Journalists exchanged glances. Team personnel eavesdropped from behind the Ferrari trucks. Other drivers, like vultures, watched from a distance, silently thankful the spotlight wasn't on them. "I'm not blaming you," Lewis said finally, his voice lowering into something even more dangerous than anger resolve. "But don't mistake silence for ignorance. I see what's happening now. And I won't forget." He turned before Charles could respond. Back in the hospitality suite, panic had taken hold. Engineers were replaying telemetry logs like forensic investigators at a crime scene. Internal Slack threads exploded. Who sent what? At what time? Who signed off on the call queue? Did someone override it? Did someone intentionally prioritize car 16 over car 44? Fred stood over a laptop with the strategy director, voice strained. "We need timestamps. Raw audio. I want every communication packet from Q3 minute 5 to 7. I want it now." But somewhere deep inside Fred knew, it didn't matter. The damage was done. Lewis hadn't just lost a lap. He had lost trust. And that trust, so fragile, so hard-earned, had been quietly sabotaged. Not by sabotage in the literal sense, but by something worse: doubt. Doubt in the system. Doubt in the people around him. Doubt in the very fabric of fairness. And for Lewis Hamilton, that was the ultimate betrayal. What the world didn't know, yet, was that a shift had just occurred. Not in position. Not in pace. But in loyalty. From that moment forward, Lewis was no longer driving for Ferrari. He was driving against them. And when Lewis Hamilton drives with vengeance in his heart, history tends to follow. The air in the garage was thick with tension, the kind that clung to your skin and made every breath feel just a little heavier. The race had ended nearly an hour ago, but for Lewis Hamilton, it might as well have been seconds. His jaw was set, fists clenched, the fire in his eyes burning hotter than the exhaust still radiating off the cars. He spotted Charles across the paddock, casually chatting with his engineer, laughing, like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just benefited from something that had left Lewis in ruins. "Hey," Hamilton called, his voice low but razor-sharp. Not loud, but dangerous. The kind of tone that made heads turn and conversations die mid-sentence. Charles Leclerc stopped. His shoulders tensed as if someone had pressed a cold blade to the back of his neck. He turned slowly, unsure of what was coming, but fully aware it wasn't going to be good. "Lewis?" he asked, a cautious curiosity in his voice, laced with confusion, or maybe it was guilt. Hamilton marched toward him, not running, not storming, but gliding like a man with purpose, a man who had been burning with the same question since he crossed the line. "You got the warning, didn't you?" The accusation cut through the air like a dagger, and he didn't blink. Charles blinked, trying to hide the flicker of realization that crossed his face. "What?" "Don't play dumb, Charles," Lewis hissed. "You lifted in turn 11. I saw it. On board doesn't lie. You knew. You backed off because someone told you, warned you, you were pushing the limit." Charles hesitated, caught between truth and diplomacy. "They just said I was close. Nothing definitive. Just a little heads up." Lewis scoffed, loud enough to draw glances from a few crew members nearby. "A little heads up. Isn't that nice?" He leaned in, voice lowering but becoming even more dangerous. "Because I didn't get one. Not a whisper. Not a hint. I'm pushing flat out, lap on the edge, and suddenly, boom, time deleted. Just like that. No warning. No comms. Nothing." Charles looked down, shifting uncomfortably. "Lewis, come on. I didn't ask for it. I was focused on my lap. I didn't know you weren't getting the same info." Lewis's eyes blazed with a quiet fury. "That's not the point. We're in the same team, Charles. Same car, same setup, same stakes. When comms go out to one of us and not the other, it's not just a mistake, it's a message. And I'm starting to wonder who it's from." Charles crossed his arms, defensive now, shoulders stiff. "So what, you think I'm in on some conspiracy now? That I've got some secret line to the pit wall just to sabotage you? Get real, Lewis." "I think," Lewis said slowly, "that when you're the one who benefits from a mistake, every single time, it stops looking like a coincidence. And starts looking like something a lot more calculated." Charles took a sharp breath, then stepped forward, voice raised. "Calculated? Are you kidding me? You think I'm the one pulling strings here? Do you even hear yourself right now?" Lewis didn't flinch. "I hear myself just fine. What I don't hear are the messages I should have gotten. Messages that you did get. And it's not the first time." The words hung between them like storm clouds. The tension was radioactive. Neither man moved. The paddock was watching now, mechanics pretending not to stare, journalists discreetly lifting phones, team personnel frozen mid-task. Ferrari's two star drivers, barely keeping the car on track together, now face-to-face in a clash that could erupt at any second. "You think I don't want you to succeed?" Charles finally said, his voice cracking slightly, not with weakness, but with frustration. "You think this is easy for me? Walking that fine line between being a teammate and being a rival? You've won 7 world titles, Lewis. I'm still fighting for my first. Every lap, every corner, it's survival for me." Lewis stepped closer, eyes locked on his teammates, voice quiet but deadly. Then fight fair. Don't take the help and pretend you didn't. Don't play innocent when you're racing with a shield while I'm sent into battle blindfolded. Charles opened his mouth, closed it. There was too much to say, too many emotions crashing into each other like waves in a storm. And suddenly, the laughter from earlier seemed a world away. The camaraderie, the team briefings, the shared podium hopes, it all felt artificial, manufactured, fragile. "You don't trust me," Charles finally said, almost like he was realizing it for the first time himself. Lewis didn't answer right away. Just stared. And when he finally spoke, the words cut deep. "I used to." Then he walked away, leaving Charles standing in silence, surrounded by noise. The noise of engines, of whispers, of tension no amount of PR spin could silence. The kind of moment that didn't just crack relationships, it split teams down the middle. And in that moment, Ferrari wasn't red. It was fractured. Splintered by silence, broken by a message that was, or wasn't, sent at exactly the wrong time. "Exactly," Lewis snapped, the edge in his voice slicing through the heavy atmosphere like a scalpel. His eyes burned, not just with frustration, but with something deeper. Betrayal. Disbelief. You're out there focused on your perfect lap, and they're focused on you. Every call, every adjustment, every ounce of support, they're behind you. So tell me, Charles, where the hell does that leave me? The 7-time world champion. The guy who came here to build something. The guy who put his legacy on the line for this team. And now I'm the one left in the shadows while the golden boy gets everything handed to him like it's written in the damn contract. Charles flinched, not from the volume of the words but from the weight they carried. He tried to stay composed, his lips pressed into a tight line before speaking, but his voice still trembled slightly, betraying the emotional chaos behind his usually calm demeanor. "That's not fair, Lewis," he said, shaking his head. "You know that's not fair. I never asked for special treatment. I didn't campaign for favoritism. I just drove the lap I was told to. I did what they asked. That's all." Lewis scoffed, stepping closer, his presence towering despite the calm tone that followed. "And look how well that worked out for you. Pole position. Media hype. The cameras glued to your every move. Congratulations. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in the garage, stuck behind traffic, while the pit wall forgets how radios work when I need answers." Charles stiffened. "You think I'm the enemy now?" he asked, incredulous. "You think I orchestrated this? That I plotted with the team to sabotage your qualifying? You seriously believe I'm behind all of this?" Lewis didn't blink. His voice dropped an octave, cold and clinical. "No," he said flatly. "I don't think you planned it. But you sure as hell profited from it. And you didn't say a damn word when you could've." Silence fell between them, suffocating and thick. Charles opened his mouth, but no words came. Lewis didn't wait. He turned and walked away, boots pounding the asphalt with a deliberate rhythm, each step sounding like a closing door. Charles watched him disappear down the corridor, stunned, his breath shallow. The silence he left behind wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that signaled something had snapped, something crucial, invisible, and possibly irreversible. What had started as a qualifying misstep had evolved into something much more insidious. This wasn't just a bad call. This wasn't just about dirty air or track position. This was about trust, or more precisely, the sudden and brutal absence of it. Hamilton hadn't come to Ferrari just to race. He had come to create a legacy, to reshape the future of the most historic team in Formula One. But right now, that future felt like it was crumbling under his boots. The paddock, buzzing with murmurs and subtle glances, felt like a pressure cooker. Mechanics looked away. Engineers typed faster. Team principals exchanged hushed words, their faces pale. By the time Lewis had vanished from sight, the damage had already leaked beyond the garage walls. Social media exploded. Within minutes, #JusticeForLewis was the #1 trending topic worldwide. Fans posted screenshots of team radio transcripts, slowed down footage of pit exit moments, and graphs breaking down sector times to show how the strategy had seemingly been designed to disadvantage Hamilton. Theories swirled. Was Ferrari really favoring Leclerc? Was this shades of Alonso versus Hamilton 2007? Was history repeating itself? In TV studios around the world, pundits couldn't keep up. Martin Brundle raised an eyebrow during a live broadcast. Naomi Schiff looked stunned. Jenson Button speculated that this was the start of a civil war at Maranello. Even Nico Rosberg, a man who knows how hard it is to coexist with Hamilton, looked genuinely concerned. "This isn't just a bad day," he said. "This is a crack in the foundation of Ferrari's 2025 campaign." Inside the Scuderia headquarters, chaos brewed. Fred Vasseur was reportedly fuming, holding emergency meetings with senior staff behind closed doors. Press officers worked overtime to spin the narrative. First came the generic statement, a misunderstanding during qualifying, which the team will review internally. But that only made things worse. Fans weren't stupid. They saw through the corporate gloss. They wanted answers. They wanted accountability. Back in the paddock, Charles sat alone in the driver's room, still in his fireproofs, staring at his gloves like they held the truth. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't a villain. But he was the face of this storm now, whether he wanted it or not. And he knew it. The adoration of the Tifosi now came with a price, the burden of perception. And tonight, perception was turning against him. Lewis, on the other hand, had left the circuit. Not stormed off. Not slammed doors. Just walked out. Quietly. Controlled. But that silence was louder than any outburst. It was a message. And everyone heard it. To insiders, the signs were clear. Hamilton's body language. His refusal to attend the debrief. His decision to skip press interviews. He wasn't sulking. He was calculating. Processing. Deciding what came next. And with every minute that passed, the atmosphere inside Ferrari grew more unstable. The drivers might not have thrown punches. But emotionally, this was war. This was two titans, forced into a shared garage, now orbiting like volatile planets on a collision course. And when drivers of this caliber, both desperate to prove themselves, both carrying the hopes of millions, stop trusting each other, the team doesn't just suffer. It implodes. Every whisper in the garage now carried extra weight. Every look from a mechanic. Every delayed radio call. Every team meeting would now be watched like a hawk, not just by media but by Hamilton himself, who has seen this before and knows exactly how these stories unravel. And what of the championship? What of the dream Ferrari sold when they brought Lewis into the fold? If this moment spirals, if unity dissolves, it won't just be races that are lost, it'll be everything. The title. The image. The future. The paddock lights began to dim, but no one was sleeping. Not the team. Not the fans. Not the media. Because now, the narrative had shifted. Ferrari wasn't fighting Red Bull or Mercedes this weekend. They were fighting themselves. And Lewis Hamilton? He wasn't just racing for glory anymore. He was racing to reclaim control. To remind everyone, Charles, the team, the sport, exactly who he is. And if they thought this was over, they'd forgotten one thing. Legends don't walk away quietly. They come back harder. For Lewis Hamilton, Sunday didn't begin with optimism. It didn't begin with a smile, or with pre-race radio chatter about tire temps and fuel loads. It began with silence. The kind of silence that screams louder than a million voices. A silence laced with disbelief, with betrayal, with the kind of pain only a champion feels when he's been cornered, dismissed, and quietly shoved out of the spotlight by the very empire he built. Because when the number 16 flashed next to his name on the grid, it wasn't just a low qualifying position, it was a slap in the face. A declaration that he no longer mattered. A quiet, corporate whisper that the future belonged to someone else. That his time, his reign, his magic, was over. But what they didn't realize, what they never understood, was that you don't put Lewis Hamilton in a box and expect him to fade. You don't back a lion into a corner and expect it to roll over. You back a lion into a corner, and eventually, it stops waiting. It roars. This wasn't a race. Not anymore. This wasn't about undercuts, tire life, or pit window predictions. It had become something far more primitive, far more dangerous. This was a battlefield. And Hamilton? He was going to war. The moment those 5 lights began to illuminate, everything else dissolved. His telemetry, the critics, the tension in the garage, the cameras, the whispers, the articles, the looks, the passive-aggressive meetings, the politics, all of it gone. All that remained was raw, unfiltered vengeance wrapped in 1,000 horsepower. Because the fire inside Lewis doesn't dim when challenged. It grows. It spreads. It consumes. And when you make the mistake of doubting him, publicly, privately, or silently, you aren't just provoking a driver. You're unleashing a force that has spent 2 decades proving the impossible wrong. 16th? A number. A meaningless, temporary insult on a digital screen. The world may have seen him buried on the 8th row of the grid, but Lewis saw something else. He saw a straight line to redemption. He saw 15 obstacles between him and a statement that had to be made, had to be felt. Because this wasn't about points. It wasn't about podiums or saving face. It was about pride. About dignity. About a man fighting not just for position, but for his soul. Every gear shift became a defiant scream. Every braking zone was a protest against irrelevance. Every corner he took wasn't just for time, it was to reclaim what they had tried to take from him, respect. And with every overtake, every time he sent it down the inside with millimeter precision, every time he held his nerve while others buckled, he wasn't just gaining places. He was tearing pages out of the narrative that others had written for him. The one that said he was finished. The one that said he'd lost it. The one that said he no longer belonged at the sharp end. That every podium he once stood on was a relic. That the roar of his engine would soon become a memory. That the Mercedes team, the same team that rode his genius to 7 titles, had already begun building a future without him. But Lewis? He doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive easily. And he sure as hell doesn't go quietly. He turned that cockpit into a weapon, that steering wheel into a sword, and the racetrack into his battlefield. Not with arrogance, but with fury sharpened by years of experience. Because when you strip everything away, when the headlines fade and the PR disappears, what's left is a man who has bled for this sport. A man who has stared down racism, adversity, heartbreak, and pressure that would have shattered lesser souls. And now, once again, they dared to doubt him. And the beauty of it? He didn't need a front row start. He didn't need the fastest car. He didn't need the perfect strategy. He just needed the lights to go out. Because once they did, instinct took over. Rage turned into rhythm. Pain turned into precision. And doubt? It turned into fuel. While others hesitated, Lewis attacked. While others played it safe, he took risks. He danced with the limits of physics and came out laughing. Not for the cameras. Not for the fans. But because it reminded him who the hell he still is. And in that storm of carbon and chaos, every driver he passed became part of a statement louder than any interview: you will not erase me. You will not bury me before I'm dead. I made this team. I built this empire. I carried it on my shoulders. And now, when it's convenient, you act like I'm already gone? Watch me. The paddock felt it. The garages went silent with each move. The commentators ran out of superlatives. Because this wasn't a comeback. This was a rebellion. A declaration of war against complacency. Against the narrative. Against the machine that thought they could replace heart with data. And as the laps ticked down and the positions melted away beneath him like snow in fire, one truth became clear: Hamilton was not done. He was not fading. He was not retiring quietly. He was just getting angry. And when Lewis Hamilton gets angry, the sport trembles. Because you can give a young talent a faster car, a better start, fresher tires. But you cannot give them the scars. You cannot give them the fury of a man who has had to fight for everything. You cannot simulate the drive of someone who's been humiliated by the system that once hailed him as king. And you absolutely cannot replicate what it looks like when a legend, burning with betrayal, decides to write his own ending. This wasn't just a drive through the field. This was an uprising. This was Hamilton at his rawest, his most primal, tearing down everything in his way with a quiet, terrifying certainty that said, "You've made the biggest mistake of your lives by doubting me. And now, I'm going to remind every single one of you why you used to believe." Because on that Sunday, it wasn't strategy. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a miracle. It was war. And Lewis Hamilton? He didn't just show up to fight. He showed up to win.